Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the special Transportation and Public Infrastructure Committee meeting for Tuesday, July 22nd, the second one this month. We have an agenda in front of us. I would like to add at the end capital projects, verbal report and update from engineering. Any other changes? If not, can I have somebody to move approval of the agenda as modified? Thank you. Moved by Gibb. All those in favour? Carried. We've got one set of minutes from July 7th to adopt. Changes? Gibb?
At the end of item 3.3 in the minutes, it would appear nobody moved.
Funny, I do remember seeing that and thinking, does anybody remember who did move it?
I think it's Gord.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Logan.
Sounds good.
Pat, did you get that? It's the
Yes.
it's the motion under 3.3.
It was Gordy, right?
Yeah, moved by Gordy. So with that change, somebody like to move adoption of the minutes? Moved by another change. Sorry, Gibb.
In item, there's a lot of discussion. Under my comments, there seems to be a full sentence that's put in twice in two different places.
Right.
And one sentence that says we should maybe, period. And then ask about sewer from recommendation, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if that
Yeah.
needs to be wordsmithed a bit. And then about two sentences later is the repeat of my having concerns in removing the parking on both sides of Kelly Road. Residents with home-based businesses that might cause people to park on side streets, and it also appears apropos of the third sentence in on that.
Can you give me that page number?
14 of 106 is what I've got on the
Okay.
printed
Yeah.
copy.
It's split between 13 and 14.
Okay,
Bottom of 13 and 14.
okay.
So those were the only issues I saw in the minutes.
Well, it was clearly a good point because you needed to make it twice.
I know I was talking.
But maybe not that much. Okay. All right. Any other? If not, Greg, you still willing to move
Yes.
as amended?
As amended.
Okay, all those in favour? Carried. All right. Under new business, report deposit requirements by other municipalities with regard to oversized vehicle on municipal roads. Michael.
Yes, so this is a fairly straightforward report giving you ideas of what other municipalities charge for their oversized permits. And some of them charge very, very little. I think if you look at City of Langford, there's a permit of a minimum $35 for a fee with a security deposit minimum of $750 amount to be sufficient in the opinion of the city engineer to pay the cost of repairing any damage. So that theirs is very little, but with a judgment factor in there. So our standard $10,000 is definitely, I would say, based on the ones we canvassed, is high for a standard amount. So we've put forward some options. Obviously, leave the deposit requirements as they are, which isn't a recommended one, to increase or decrease the deposit requirements. Possibly cut it in half because there's a good record so far. Or we could change the fixed deposit to a variable deposit because with a table of fees, depending on how wide the load is, because it would seem, if our intent is to protect ourselves against the possibility that damage will occur, and we want to make it easy to recover the money, then The deposit should vary depending on the over width or the over height. A load that's only 4 inches over width is a pretty safe bet, and that could be very small. But a load that's a lane and a half wide, I mean, their chances of hitting a pole somewhere go up. Or I guess there should be a fourth option in there, which would be to, come down to the same as Langford, which is an opinion-based deposit fee. Or you could do a fixed one that's very low, I guess. So we've taken a cautious approach, saying, don't go right down to zero. We've had good experience so far, but we're recommending that we do up a table, bring it back to committee for further discussion.
Thank you. Any members of the public wishing to speak to this one? Seeing none? Committee? Thoughts? Gib?
A couple of thoughts. One is, usually when an oversized load is being moved through the city of Colwood, it's not just through the city of Colwood. It's going to be going through View Royal, Colwood, Langford, out through Machosen too, and I guess it kind of surprises me that it hasn't been approached before, that an intermunicipal permit of some sort, for at least for the western communities, if not for the Greater Victoria area, be considered. I know we have to protect our interests, and I kind of like the way Ministry of Transportation does it, where it's a fairly low fee for the permit, but they require $1 million liability. And if on the permit somewhere it has the permit holder saying that any damage will be billed directly to the insurance provider as listed on the permit, protects the municipality from having to chase people, doesn't necessarily cost a huge amount of money, and it takes care of the whole trip with one permit. Of course, that would require having to do something in conjunction with the other municipalities. But it just, if I was moving something from downtown to Souk, and I was going to have to put a $750 deposit in Langford for the bit that I'm going through them, and a $10,000 deposit in Colwood, and I don't have to put a deposit down in Souk, but MOTI says that I've got to have $1 million in insurance, and each one of those stops I have to pay for a permit. To me, it just seems redundant. So those are kind of my thoughts on it. I think I'd prefer to see us protected than taking a deposit that has to come in and then go back, if it can be worked out legally somewhere in the permit to make sure that you've got the liability insurance to cover any damage.
We can look into that with the association, but I believe that they're covered by ICBC, and you can't bind ICBC to anything in particular. By writing into the permit that that they agree that we can charge anything straight to the insurance company doesn't necessarily mean the insurance company is going to agree to pay out. So I've never heard that there's a record of people moving houses, bashing over streetlights, and disappearing. It's difficult to disappear with a house, I guess. But so. It's debatable how cautious you need to be on that. We are sort of taking the attitude of let's reduce it slowly and see what the experience is, but I don't think that there's a way to absolutely guarantee that you're going to get the money on the insurance. The way we do it with third-party insurers who aren't ICBC is we ask to be additional named insured on the policy. That apparently covers you off. But as far as I know, you can't do that with ICBC, but we can look into it.
Greg?
So are you saying that the ICBC insurance is the insurance that covers them when they're moving something and it's not their other liability insurance? It wouldn't carry, like...
No, I think because it's a vehicle moving on the road, they just have special ICBC insurance, but I stand to be corrected on that. I actually thought the association representative said that at a meeting. I could be wrong. Going on memory.
Because I would, that would seem to be like what you mentioned there before, where we could be named as a party to the insurance, and if there was damage to our property as a result of their actions, we would be covered by their insurance. That would seem to be a straightforward thing. I agree with Gib. It seems like a very balkanized sort of way to move something, and hopefully as development occurs in the future. When all those vehicles came in for the Royal Bay sort of land moving thing they did, were those all oversized? Did they all have to take out those permits? And
Yeah, everyone was a permit.
with the $10,000 deposit or whatever the deposit was, and the...
Yeah, people doing that sort of thing will usually just put one down one deposit
And roll it
just
over.
roll it over. Yeah.
I see. Because it's the kind of thing that I think it would be in the benefit of everybody to make it as easy as possible to occur. Because, like you say, the damage done is often easy to get repaired because they are slow-moving vehicles, and it is possible to, they're usually firms that are noted for doing this sort of thing, and they've been around for a while. So I do like the idea of a table where we could come up with something, make it very clear, but certainly minimizing the costs to the folks that need to get this work done to build up our community are important, and I'd like to keep it as simple as possible. Ideally, being named as a party to the insurance would seem to be the easiest route, if that's possible.
We'll find out more about that, and also we'll inquire about getting together with the other municipalities, see if they're interested.
That's a great idea.
Come up with one form.
Gordy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So would this cover non-city infrastructure as well, Michael, like BC hydro poles and that sort of infrastructure that doesn't come under our purview? Or how would they be?
I'm not quite sure about the details of the legality of using that deposit that way, but it's certainly good leverage in that case. The only case I can remember of a hydro pole being hit, it was hit by an ordinary standard width truck.
Yeah.
We just took the corner too close.
Yeah. Quite frankly, I don't.
And that pole's been
There's
moved.
going to be a lot of this. Yeah. I don't think this is going to happen a great deal, but I think it's important that it be consistent. At least on the West Shore and easy, and certainly probably having an intermunicipal permit, like Gibb said, makes perfect sense, much like a business license. So it's a one-stop shop, no matter where they pick it up. But,
Hi, can we help you?
well, hi there.
I was wondering if you mentioned that there's going to be some plans on show for the building on Raven.
There's a meeting at 7 o'clock that you're asking about?
Pardon me?
It's about Ravenwood?
Yeah.
Okay, it's at 7 o'clock and it's down this way at
Okay.
Oh, it's not here?
It's here, but just in another room.
Different room.
Sorry.
You're welcome to join our meeting. We're probably having way more fun.
Thank you.
Sorry, Gordy, I didn't know if you'd finished or not.
No, that's fine.
Okay. I think, as usual, by the time you three have spoken, you've said all the good ideas, and I have absolutely nothing more to add. So there seems to be sort of support for, something simple, something straightforward, make sure we're protected, but keep it simple, look at intermunicipal options. There was the look at having us as sort of named under liability coverage. With all of that, Michael, do you have thoughts on how we might adjust the recommendation?
Let me just go back to that report.
Madam Chair, one question. How much staff time is going to be involved in developing a new table under the bylaw 1134 to determine costs for the deposit or fees for the deposit depending on how much you're over the load and how much you're not?
It's not going to be terribly scientific.
Okay.
It'll be done in a couple of hours.
Well, I mean, that goes without saying.
Well, I don't think there is
They're unscientific.
I don't think there's an entirely scientific way to arrive at it. But mainly if we do anything to sort of check on the numbers, it would be talking to other municipalities about
Okay.
their actual claims experience and talking to the association again.
So I guess I'm still
I've got a paper page there.
hoping for some suggested language.
So perhaps if we used the wording in option 3, but added with also looking into cooperation with other municipalities and being named as a on the insurance of the applicant.
Yeah, so I think you can add sort of either a resolution, a second resolution, or just add a separate paragraph to this, saying those two things, because I think you probably want us to go ahead and bring forward the bylaw change anyway, because if we go to an intermunicipal permit, guaranteed 6 months minimum to get that in place.
Right.
And the additional named insured, we can look at that pretty quickly and we can bring that back with the table. So if you want to add another paragraph that says that staff investigate the possibility of having the city added as additional named insured to the transporter's insurance policy, and the possibility of an intramunicipal permit so that the transporting companies only need one permit to go through the entire West Shore.
Makes sense. Is there somebody who would like to make that? Gib? Okay. Okay. So Pat, that was moved by Gib.
As additional named insured on the
It's a lot easier when you scan.
Well, I was going to say it's. Right.
I'll shorten some of the words.
We're good? Okay. So that was moved by Gib.
It was moved by Gib.
It was moved by Gib.
Very good.
Well done, Gib.
Unless there is any further discussion, I will call the question. All those in favour? Carried. Alrighty, thank you. Next item 3.2, request for the extension of the transit shelter agreement. Michael, I'm guessing that's you again.
Yes. So the transit sheltering agreement expired in 2013. And it's just been carrying on as if it hadn't expired, but it is time to actually renew or decide to do something with it. I gather the first one was in 1998, so it's been going for a while. And I can't say that I'm aware of any negative experience with the agreement. There's a list of all of the Pattison shelters and where they are, and they tend to be on major roads, as you can see. And then there should be lower down, as I remember it, on page 3, top of page 3 of the report, is a list of Colwood's shelters, which are not all on the majors, although again, most of them are. The financial implications for this are that if the agreement is extended, Pattison will continue to maintain the shelters and pay rental fees, and a portion of the advertising revenues to Colwood. And based on what we received in 2013, we'd get approximately 15,000 for the 2 years to 2015. If the agreement isn't extended, and Pattison actually removes the shelters, and it's highly debatable whether they would actually remove them. It would cost them money to remove the shelters, obviously, but then maybe, that's, they would do that in order to...
Sorry, are you guys looking for the Ravenwood meeting or the transportation meeting? That is,
No.
whereabouts is that?
Uh,
The front?
It's a board of variance meeting.
Oh, okay.
So you're in the wrong room. It's just that room that you came in front door there.
Yeah.
If you were just go in there, then there's a couple other people waiting as well. And Ian will come and get you.
It sounds like
That's like it's going to be
good
lively.
crowd, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Michael, carry on.
So if we don't extend the agreement, then we won't get the advertising revenues unless we took over that ourselves. If Pattison doesn't remove the shelters, obviously we'd be responsible for the maintenance. But I think in I've lost my options here. In the options, so we've said we could agree to extend the agreement until 2015, or not agree to extend and give Pattison the option of possibly removing the shelters. If Pattison did remove the shelters, we could request new shelters from BC Transit, but they would not be free. We have to add some money to those, and that's in number 3, the financial implications. And you could ask staff to issue a request for proposals for the provision of bus shelters with advertising, and see if there's somebody out there better than Pattison. I've never heard of that, and I'm not aware of anybody else who does that. But those are the options. So we're actually recommending that we enter into the extension for 2 years and try a request for proposals before that agreement is up, and bring back a recommendation based on the proposals received.
Thank you. Dwayne, I knew you had something you wanted to say on this subject. I'm looking forward to finding out.
I laughed when I mentioned that at the last meeting. My name's Dwayne McNeil, 487 Sumar Place. So I've been reading over the proposals about this agreement, and I would fully hope that the council or committee would approve going after an extension until 2015. After 15 years of supplying us with bus shelters, they must see profit in it. And it has saved us having to look after this problem ourselves. But secondly, I note that we have nine bus stops that are not run by private enterprise. And I would hope that one of the recommendations would be that in putting out a new RFP, that those be included as well. The 9 that we own are now in areas where development is occurring. Therefore, exposure is better than it was in 1998. So there would be a profit margin for these companies to want to do that. It would, in the end, save us from having to use our gas tax money for bus shelters. We could use that somewhere else in a bigger project like the redevelopment of Kelly Road. And secondly, annual maintenance costs would be covered, and the city could make some more money. So in the end, we would probably see a greater net, which is beneficial to the taxpayer, than trying to have BC Transit or ourselves. So that's the only thing I wanted to bring up. I noticed there were 2 groups of bus shelters, one they run, one we run, and I would just hope that down the road that we would seek that they someone take all 18 on.
Great, thank you.
Make more money. Thanks.
Thank you. Just wanting to make sure you didn't want to jump in on this one too.
No, I don't have anything to say, but I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have on Pattison.
Ah, wonderful. Excellent. Thank you. Welcome. Okay. have a question. Do you like his suggestion? Perhaps for our recorder, you could give us your name.
My name is Don Higginson. I'm the manager of Transit Shelter Development with Patterson Outdoor Pacific Region. I was the individual who originally brought transit shelters to Colwood. Been doing this role for 29 years, and I service 34 municipalities in BC.
Excellent. So, what did you think of Mr. McNeil's suggestion?
If from our standpoint, we have two options. We have an issue with hydro, which we have talked to staff about. Hydro don't allow us to attach to their poles anymore. That comes from a work safety issue with guys going up the poles with their belts and spurs. If they come down, they can catch their knees or ankles on a disconnect box that's on the pole. That really isn't an issue here in Langford because most of them are direct feeds from the. However, we are experiencing some lack of continuity from one area within hydro to another. So we get an interpretation.
She's just turning on the microphone.
I should bring you everywhere I go.
There you go.
So
We have karaoke night
we
afterwards.
find the rules that Hydro have in Nanaimo are different than we have in Surrey and different than what we have in Victoria. So we're just trying to gather really where we can go, and that is why we asked for the delay initially. We have inspected the shelters. We're not happy with the condition they're in. They're old. So the plan we've had for over 2 years was to replace all the shelters, make them better, make them more modern. Newer shelters now are all coming with LED lights, so they're more user-friendly, or environmentally friendly, shall we say. If we look better on the streets will look better. So that's our ultimate goal, and we are marching through our system doing that. If we don't have the opportunity to do that now, well, we'll just wait until the RFP comes out and we will put a bid in and we will hopefully win that. But we will be doing exactly the same thing if we do win it. And sir, your point with the additional shelters, the city-owned and transit-owned shelters, we attempt to do the best job we can in selecting sites that will work for the people ultimately pay for the shelters and the maintenance, which is the advertiser, and meet the needs of the municipality. We can't always make it work. We have to have power. We have to have a certain amount of space to allow enough pedestrian pass through, either in front of the shelter or behind the shelter. So many of the city-owned shelters and the transit provided shelters now are in locations that our product would be very difficult, if possibly not, we couldn't put it in, and still meet all the right-of-way requirements, safety requirements. I was driving through Victoria with one of our salespeople because they're looking to us saying, give us more opportunity, give us, new shelters, give us new locations to sell. And their discussion was revolved about, well, I can't do it there, it's not big enough. I can't do it there because there's no power, and I can't do it there because there's a driveway on the other side. We can't install a shelter on the near side of a driveway that's going to create a sightline issue. We have a solid end there. BC Transit are totally transparent, but you can't see them when they're much narrower, and the city-owned shelters usually are clear. So we try to make it, we always review and approach every request we get from a municipality or from the public, or from transit, or from our sales department, or things we see ourselves. Growth-oriented company, that's what we do. But not every opportunity we can successfully approach.
Thank you. Committee? Questions, comments, suggestions? Great.
Do you do benches as well as shelters?
Ad benches,
Yeah.
we have one market we do them in, actually two. We sell the benches that are owned by the city of Kelowna, and we have shelters in the Corporation of Delta, or we have benches in the Corporation of Delta. More recently, we have supplied benches to the municipalities to avoid having to go into the ad business and shelters too. It's a totally different game.
Hmm.
And
Okay. Sorry, Madam Chair, through you, the engineer. Am I reading this right, that we get $15,000 revenue from the shelters, and it costs us $6,400 to maintain the ones we have? So does that net out to like $8,600? Am I reading that right?
That's what it, yeah,
That's what happens.
yeah.
Okay. And then, have you gone through, I guess if, I'd like Mr. McNeil's idea there of looking at some of the other, have you looked at the other opportunities in Colwood to add more shelters, which would give you more revenue, which would presumably give the city more revenue?
well,
Not all, like not as a whole basket, just as individuals.
we renewed the agreement once already, and at that time, the city said, well, we'd like a shelter here, here, and here. But we couldn't supply those shelters. So we actually gifted the city 3 non-net shelters that are on the street now. So at least 3, I think it was 3, of the shelters that are in your inventory, we supplied them. I believe you installed them and you're maintaining.
And how well, I know that some of them are going solar, and certainly Colwood has a great interest in converting projects to solar where possible. With LED lighting and more efficiency, how efficient and how possible is it to go with more solar lighting?
When we started, when I sent the letter to Ms. Lockhart originally, we have found a contractor here in Victoria who seemed to be on the leading edge. They do a lot of work down in the States. They said it was possible, that there was more hours of sunlight in Victoria than in Vancouver. Unfortunately, they came back a month later and reversed that opinion. So we are, at this point, a little skeptical that we're there yet, but it's compared to 5 years ago, and 10 years ago, and 15 years ago when we first investigated, we're almost there. But we can light a shelter, like Baldwin shelter, but from our business, we have to light the ad panel. And
Right.
if we had, whether today, 7 months of the year instead of 2 months of the year, there would be no problem. And the areas where they are having success with it is to the, in our southern neighbors.
Right. And sort of one other question I have regarding the ads, and we talked about this briefly at the last meeting. I remember several years back, we got these benches, the plastic benches that are just sort of mounted on gravel. And they serve, the idea was that the owner of the benches would get revenue, and we would get benches as an amenity for people waiting for bus stops that were not in areas where Pattison would be prepared to put shelters. And that's why I asked the question earlier about benches and if there's a possibility there of, and I don't know what kind of agreement we ended up. I know I was involved in these discussions, but Michael, do you remember those dark days? of that
That's like
bus
4
stop
years ago.
bench debacle. It was a long time. It was more than 5 years ago now,
Was
I
it?
think. Maybe.
Well,
Maybe their agreements have.
I think it was just that somebody put a proposal to us, and there was a worry about the single source aspect of it, so we went out to tender in the end and ended up giving it to the same people anyway.
I don't see the ads changing on there. In fact, I just see the ads saying, hey, you notice this sign and these signs work, you should advertise here. but I don't see paying advertisers there. Do we get any revenue from those benches, or?
No, I don't believe so. I think that we just get the bench. As you've noted, not all of those signs or benches are actually used with ads. They do change occasionally. I have noticed new ones occasionally.
Well, I mean, I must say that I do like the way that the Pattison Group does business, obviously, and it's just, I think that if they put a bench there, it would have a proper concrete pad, and it would be something that would be, as you mentioned, making the streets look better. If the streets look better, the ads look better. It works for everybody, and the city looks better, and I like that idea. But I guess we're in an agreement with the other ones, and there's not. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity here for us to get that $6,000 number a little smaller, or $6,400 number a lot smaller.
Well, I don't know when that agreement expires, but we could certainly find out and bring it back to you.
That's all I have about that.
Thank you. Gordy, go for it.
Thank you. Actually, that would be great, Michael, if we could find out when that agreement expires and see what we can work out. I'm very heartened to hear that Pattison is wanting to replace those shelters, to spruce them up a bit. My question is, are there options that perhaps the city could have some influence in when we're looking at design, color, that sort of thing, so they kind of, they say this is Pattison, but this is also Colwood, and it's about advertising, but it's also about appearance and branding, exactly.
We've been finding that request more and more frequently. I'd say the first one was about 7 years ago with Township of Langley, and they wanted to have different colors in different areas of town. That was also done in the city of Victoria. We've got brown shelters for the most part, but they've got blue shelters and they've got green shelters. Township of Langley, they asked us to paint them geographically, and they would supply us with decals when we put it on. It said Township of Langley. More recently, we are branding the shelters a little bit more aggressively. We made a proposal last week to Fraser County Municipality that we would be taking one section of the roof and filling it in and putting and etching or decking it with, nature starts here, I believe, was in that municipality. So there's, yes, the answer is yes, we can.
That's cool.
The easy thing is color.
Yeah.
What color do you want? I won't say anything, but it has to be black. No. Whatever you want.
No, that's great. I think that's perfect. And Dwayne's suggestion is bang on. And I think we could probably come to some compromise in that, when we do, or if we do go out to RFP, we say, you know what, if it works logistically for Pattison, and they can hook up to power, yada, 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 then have at it. Obviously you're not going to install a shelter if you can't make it work. But we want to give you the opportunity to be able to see it. Go for it.
I will share with you that this afternoon I did drive all our shelters in Colwood, and I can tell you that whatever happens tonight, we're going to do some things. So, I saw some things I didn't like, and we're going to be taking some action for the near future, regardless of what comes out of this meeting. And if you choose to come back with some ideas and you'd like to talk about alternatives, doing the renegotiation, we'd be happy to do that as well. So from our standpoint, if we're going to do any work, we should, we'd be looking to set us a budget now so we can start to work early next year and go.
That's excellent. I'm glad you came.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I turn this off myself?
I don't think
Oh,
we're
you
done
can.
yet.
We're not quite done yet.
We're still on the hot seat.
The Inquisition's not done yet.
No, actually, I don't have much of an inquisition for this fine gentleman. I do have a couple of questions for the engineer, through the chair. First of all, the purchasing bylaw in Colwood, I'm not familiar with where all the benchmarks are for the various processes that we have to go through as far as dollar value amounts are concerned. In other words, at what level do we have to go to RFP? At what level do you just have to have 3 quotes? At what level do you, I'm not familiar with exactly where those are.
Yeah, it's phrased in terms of what it costs us.
Right.
Since this contract doesn't cost us anything,
Right.
then it's tough to fit it into the policy. But I would take the policy to mean that we need 3 quotes, given the value of the contract.
Okay. And I guess it was brought up earlier of the, Colwood would receive approximately 15,000, but I noticed that that's for 2 years, not for 1. So in actual fact, we're just making more money than we're spending in the total of our bus shelters. Right. And I guess the question that I have is, for the whole process of doing an RFP and then reviewing them all, the time frame involved, I'd almost be supportive of just renewing the contracts with the company that's been a good provider to this municipality for 15 years, already has some of his product here, and he just wants to continue on supplying the same contract with an extension of the existing one. I 100% support the idea of extending it until August of 2015, and that'll give us some time to take a look at what our options are. But I'd also be in support of taking a look at the proposals that this businessman brings to us before we even go to RFP. And if it meets our needs, I can see continuing on with the contract going forward and save the municipality the money and the staff time of doing the whole RFP. Thank you.
I wonder if we could even do that rather than extending the agreement, just get into those discussions. Sorry, I don't mean to.
Go for it.
But just get into those discussions now. And then it gives Patterson Group some certainty when they're doing their budgeting process to be able to invest heavily.
I mean, to me, I think today we need to recommend that the contract be extended until August of 2015. And then that'll give them a better chance to take a look and see which shelters they want to replace, which ones they want to go to LED lightings, which ones they think might work with solar or not solar. And then before the expiration of this next deal, they're probably going to have a lot more information that they can come and say, yeah, if you're interested in just extending our deal, this is what we can do for you. And I personally think it's good business.
Greg?
That's an excellent point. I agree. And sort of one of the ones that jumps out at me there is the Kelly Road at Williams Park that's currently ours. That if we're talking about redevelopment of Kelly Road, this is a great opportunity if we're going to see traffic increase on Kelly Road. This is one that obviously Patterson Group would want to jump on too. And then if we can work with what your plans are for those improvements and talking about if we're putting new shelters in, I mean, we can't really do that unless we have an agreement, I would think. So it would make it a lot easier for everybody. And is that something you engage in? Like if we're talking about redeveloping a stretch of road, and that's going to involve bus shelters. And right now, according to this list, I don't think at least one of them is not part of your shelters. Is that something that you do, where you would work with the city when we're talking about new?
Absolutely. We in the majority of our municipal agreements, the municipalities are mature. Their transfer routes have been set for a number of years. They're not growing up the mountain or expanding up the valley. They're landlocked almost. So most of the growth is in conjunction with the municipality where they see road work coming, or they see that there's new development happening, and the developer actually is involved with providing the infrastructure, the curb and the sidewalk, bringing power to the site, and then bringing shelter. So it becomes instead of a partnership between Patterson and the municipality, it's an extended partnership in Greater Vancouver, they have something called the TRIP program, where they will assist the municipality in site prepping. And with private interests, if they want to put a high-rise up, or if they're doing a condo situation, or a grocery store is going in, then they are providing some infrastructure support to the municipality, which we all benefit. And that even includes West Vancouver. Shell Oil had to redesign a gas station, Marine Drive, and they are providing new sidewalk and curbing to the municipality and enough space for us to drop a new shop. So, happens everywhere.
Thank you.
So just to kind of, I mean, I think everybody's agreed that the 2-year extension makes sense. We've already raised one of the other pieces that I was going to be raising, which is the sort of the bus bench program, and my memory is that was a 3-year deal, and I'm thinking that was 3 years ago. So I would love to see us kind of go forward with renew the contract until next year, which is effectively a 2-year extension, but then basically directing, rather than being specific, directing staff to kind of look at options for renewing the bus shelter piece and the bus bench piece. Mm-hmm. Could be two companies, could be one company, could be that staff recommendation is, you guys are the only game in town, so we should just, work with you. Could be that it's there's a request for expressions of interest, just to find out if there's anybody else who might be interested in putting forward a proposal. So rather than being kind of specific about it's an RFP, being more kind of, open to kind of looking at what might work best. And as I say, they might be two separate pieces, or they might be, it might be one company's interested in bidding on both pieces. It might be that you have no interest in the bus benches, but clearly an interest in the shelter. And I love, too, the idea of when we go through that process, providing the ability to look at not only the ones that you're currently running for us, but also, are there, of these other ones, are there any that you're interested in adding into your list?
We will be doing a lot of that ourselves anyway, over the next 6 months, shall we say.
Yep.
Because to me, the biggest question is solar power.
Yep.
Where I was quite confident, and our operations department was quite confident 2 months ago, now we're got to step back from it. So if we can't go solar now, that doesn't mean we won't be able to do it for some time in the future, as long as we prepare.
But I think the year kind of gives you an opportunity to kind of look at which way you might be interested in going forward.
That industry is advancing.
Yeah.
When we first looked at it, we would have had to cover the entire roof with collectors and put a battery pack that would maybe fit underneath the length of the bench. And back then, our benches were 8 feet long. So now, the collectors may be this long by this wide, and the battery would fit on the roof, or maybe even just below the ad can. So they have made huge strides. In reality, it's not quite there.
Sounds good. Okay. Committee, what do we want to look at for a recommendation? Good.
I'd recommend, firstly, that the CAO be authorized to extend the agreement till August of 2015, exactly as it's written. And the second recommendation is that staff investigate future shelters and future bench agreements, and you bring those back to the committee.
Do you want to add things like branding the shelters? color and logo.
Yeah, good idea, yeah.
And the existing bench.
Yeah, I think that's part of the,
think that's part of the-
yeah,
that's part of the-
investigating the benches and, yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. Any further discussion on that one? Seeing none, all those in favour? Carried. So because of the time of year it is, that will go to council on August the 25th. So there's a bit of a delay in that, but stay tuned.
Thank you for your participation and views and the opportunity to change mine with you.
Yep.
And I'd like to invite staff to come to us with any questions, anything you feel we may be able to help you with, because we are doing this right across the country. We have a fair amount of experience.
We appreciate that. Thank
That's
you.
great. If you have a card, you might want to leave it with Michael.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. I'm very glad you were able to make it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, excellent.
That was awesome.
Okay. 3.3 corporate 2013 corporate emissions summary. Michael.
So we open up this report talking about how the city has made, we have endorsed the province's target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 33% by 2020. And as a signatory to the Climate Action Charter, we made a commitment to become carbon neutral in operations by 2012. Which we have not achieved, but we keep working towards. Now, the Colwood Official Community Plan objectives are more ambitious than the above objectives just mentioned. For instance, per capita GHG emission reductions of 50% by 2020, which gives us a total GHG emissions reduction of 33%. And given our relatively high rate of growth, to target that 33% by 2020, despite the growth, is ambitious. But what we're going to talk about tonight is our corporate emissions, and that. Probably best to go straight to the first graph. I always think the graph tells you a lot more than the table does. So figure 1 on page 3 shows you that our own corporate emissions and West Shore's corporate emissions are not that dissimilar, despite the very different organizations we run. But what that tells you is that the West Shore is actually a very high concentration of energy use and GHG production compared to anything else the city's involved in. Because remember, that is just our share of West Shore. That's not the total West Shore energy use. So the actual West Shore energy use is something like 3 times, 4 times what the city uses. Just in those buildings. We've listed how we've achieved our reduction. So the reduction in Colwood's overall corporate GHG since 2007, including our share of West Shore, has been approximately 32%. And we don't know all the ways that West Shore's achieved their reductions, but some of them will be the same as ours. And some of them are nothing we did, but just happenstance, such as the warmer winters and the lower snow winters have saved us a lot of energy. But some of the things are things that we've done, such as buying more fuel-efficient vehicles since we restarted the fleet replacement program, and retrofitting the heating system at the fire hall was a big one. Because that's natural gas. But you can see that some of these items could reverse on us. So I don't think we should be patting ourselves on the back too frenetically. But I'll just pat myself on the back. I did buy my own electric car And I now give the city free mileage with no GHGs. So we did not, as the report points out, we didn't reduce our GHGs to zero by the end of 2013. And we didn't purchase the carbon offsets to become carbon neutral. The city has made a decision to use that money on projects within Colwood to actually reduce our energy use and reduce our GHGs. And so we've taken what it would have cost to buy the carbon offsets and used it instead on projects. So far, the only project we've done is the 4 high-pressure luminaires in Colwood Creek Park, which I highly recommend you to go and take a look at one night. I'm sure you've seen them, Gordy.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think?
They're pretty nifty.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah,
They're a good light.
Yeah, I think it's a better light than the old lights, and it's much, much cheaper to run. So we're moving to all lights being LED. I think you'll see Royal Bay go completely LED, which will be good. And in some rare cases, you'll see solar-powered LED. Although as the technology improves, that'll get better. We've given a little account of what the GHG reductions and the energy reductions have been for the fire hall in relation to the solar hot water and the solar PV. Obviously, the GHG reductions by just retrofitting the heating system were the biggest thing, because the solar PV and the solar hot water only replaced the use of electricity, which has a very low GHG component, whereas the reduction in gas use was the big one for GHGs. On table 2, page 5, you can see, and then in the graph below it, you can see the greenhouse gas emissions by fuel type. So a very small amount of our greenhouse gas emissions come from electricity. Most of it's the use of diesel and natural gas, and some of it from unleaded gas. A very small part from propane. So some of the challenges we're going to face in the future is that as the city grows, the workforce will grow. There will be more vehicles, there will be more lighting. So we're trying to face those challenges by, for instance, considering, we've actually already received a proposal to replace all of the city hall lights with LEDs, and we're just reviewing that. They're supposed to be able to get a payback in 2 years. And we're expecting a proposal on solar power for the public works yard, and also replacing those lights as well. One of the things we need to be sure of is that the quality of light from the LEDs is not going to cause an upset in the workforce, let's say. And that you're all going to look as good as you look now sitting under LED lights as you do under the current fluorescence. Helen's produced some great sets of statistics here. So you can see the energy used by fuel source as well. And to receive a 100% reduction in corporate GHG's emissions would be about 441 tons of carbon reduction, and for last year, so the diesel and the natural gas are obvious areas to keep focusing on, and we hope that one day within the next 3 years we will have a district energy loop and be able to put a proposal to West Shore to be part of doing energy swaps on site. They already do some energy swaps between, heat users and heat producers, the arenas being the obvious heat producers. And I know that the Bear Mountain Arena does some reuse of that excess heat from making ice, but more can be done there. We know that for sure. So we'd like to be part of that. The financial implications are interesting. When you see Colwood's overall corporate electricity cost increased from $143,000 in 2007 to $203,000 in 2013. There's two extra accounts there. They're probably street lighting accounts, but they certainly didn't account for all that increase. That's a measure of the price going up with BC Hydro. So we've made significant reductions in the amount of electricity we use, and the price has still gone up by almost 50%, the overall price. So that shows that there's an increasing incentive to actually reduce energy use. And we're always looking for ways that we can do that in a cost-effective way. The new subdivision standards will, for instance, probably be 100% LED lights, because the technology's reached the point where that's a cost-effective thing to do, and so that will stop us increasing our electricity so quickly as the number of lit streets expand. I don't know when BC Hydro is going to go to LED lights. I don't imagine that's going to be a quick thing. So any lights we had that are BC Hydro lights are still high pressure sodium. So we've estimated our cost to produce carbon neutrality by buying carbon credits as being only $11,000, so we're recommending, or that will be budgeted next year as. I believe actually we budgeted this year $14,000 for carbon credits. So, but we've calculated that it should only be about $11,000. So we can reduce that. So we're just recommending that Council reaffirm its 2010 instruction to all staff to constantly seek and report to Council on ways to reduce the city's energy costs and greenhouse gas production wherever that can result in a life cycle cost saving, particularly in relation to the use of vehicles, fuels, and natural gas.
Thank you. Dwayne.
Dwayne McNeil, 487 Sumar Place.
You haven't moved in the last 10 minutes?
So they're reading what the city has done to reduce its carbon emission or carbon footprint, if you want to call it that. There are some things that are tangible, like vehicles and reducing the electricity use and things like that. Now, if we've been dropping, and you're using two examples such as less snow removal and less of a colder winter, how are you going to balance that out if we get a cold winter? Because then your calculations are going to shoot right back up again, when in fact, all the other real things you can do that you have control of could be going great in one direction. And then say next year we have a really bad snow year, and all of a sudden everything goes in the opposite direction. Can't you break that out and say, here's the things we can do, here's the things we have no control over? Because when global cooling comes back, and it is coming, okay? It's gonna, it is coming. Okay. Anyways, the thing is, can't you break that down so you can it can be explained what we can do, we have control over, and then the things that we don't have control over. Because from the outside world, if you just show them one chart, they'll say, gee, you had a bad year, without reading all the footnotes. In fact, you really do want to prove what the city's done positive, and what it continues to do positive, versus what it can't control. The other thing is, does a tree have any bearing on calculations for greenhouse gas emissions or things like that?
Well, it's interesting, that last one's interesting because we use a thing called Smart Tool, which is produced by the province, and we put in all the information Smart Tool asks for, and it gives us the result. But it does not ask you how many trees you cut down or how many trees you planted. And that would be an interesting thing, yeah. We could graph that information on, if that's not too near a pun, onto this graph. That's a pun with more than one layer. We could graph that onto this graph just by, keeping track of our trees and just sort of adding in that GHG difference. I think there's enough information about how much GHG's trees soak up or don't soak up at various ages. And as for working out what we do control and what we don't control, probably going to be probably the best way to do that is to just check fuel use on all the vehicles that were used in a storm over those couple of days that the storm might go on a snowstorm. And I'm sure there's a way we have enough information now on our building energy use over a period of 7 years that we can look at the weather versus that building energy use and take an estimate anyway of what's due to weather. And then if we sort of reverse that and say, well, what if that bad weather comes back again? Colder winter, then, okay, this is the amount that we will go up. So I'm sure we can do that. The reasons Dwayne's giving are mainly about, I guess, PR, and the question is, do you want to spend the time to do that, given the purpose? I'm sure that there is a few days of statistical number crunching in there for Helen, which she loves, just absolutely loves.
The other thing that, as another matter, I had a discussion with Emmett over the redevelopment of Kelly Road, and I had said to him that I really truly believe that all our reconstruction of our roads should include canopy rebuild, because canopy over a road will cool the temperature of the road.
Yes.
And a couple things it does, it keeps the road temperatures down, but it also keeps animals off your roads. They seek heat at night. This is why they'll hang around near the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe that as a city, you can't make everybody living in a house plant trees, and nor would you want to start telling people how to live on their land. But through redevelopment, we really could have a beautiful canopy of trees going down our roads that eventually would look, and as I like to say, Upper Shelburne. Like, I think that's glorious driving down there. And there's no reason why we can't incorporate all that in our planning. And if that somehow balances out things like a cold winter, then it's to our favor. So I'm just thinking down the road, these things should be considered when we're doing these type of reports. Because it looks good one year, we have 1996 again, and it's going to blow you right out of the water. So, except you won't be using any fuel for your trucks.
Awesome. Thanks, Dwayne. Committee. Greg.
I really like the idea of the canopy rebuild, but I would argue that it should be staggered because that Shelburne canopy is all going to disappear at the same time because all those trees were planted at the same time. So they'll all expire at the same time. So I do like the idea. That's a brilliant idea, I think. What I like more about all this, rather than Helen sitting in a dark room crunching numbers, though I do like that, because this is good information, I like the fact that this is the culture of the city. And I think that's the most important thing. So how these numbers pan out, I like the fact when we had the discussion about what we're going to do with the carbon offset, we decided to make a recommendation to council here, I believe, to take that $12,000 and reinvest it within the city. And I think that this speaks more to the culture and the way that the city thinks than to the actual numbers, because the numbers are, they're tricky. A bad winter could throw them off, they could skew them, but we're moving in the right direction, and it looks to me like, particularly Public Works, which is what we sort of worry with, it looks like they're focused on that, and it looks like there is a real sense that there is a commitment to reducing it. However, it can be done. Even the smallest amount is more than most people are doing, I think, and I really like that. And I guess a question I have about in that regard is, how are we comparing to other similarly sized municipalities, and how many other municipalities are, and why haven't we won a prize for this, or have we? Did we win a prize for this yet?
No, yet.
Because I'm wondering how many other similarly sized municipalities are as committed and are taking the time to have somebody sit in that dark room and crunch the numbers and to do this work, because I think it's important. And do we have that information? Do we know how we compare to others?
Well, we know that we have so many awards, we're going to have to build a special room for them. But the league table, I've asked people who do this type of thing in the government have often asked, what would we like to see? And I've always said, I want to see a league table. I want to see who's doing well and who's not.
Well,
But-
LEAD, not LEE.
No, league table.
Okay.
So, who's top of the energy reduction? Because I think that would encourage people.
Yeah.
Langford would try so hard to beat us if they could see that we were doing better.
And we don't have that. There is no
Well,
standards.
actually, it is, because, I mean, the reason Helen spends time in her, thankfully, not very dark room, is because we're actually required by the province to produce this information and report on it year after year. So the good news is, yes, we have that, or it's that information is public for.
But they don't
All of
publish a league table of who's...
They don't publish a league table, no.
Can
No.
we?
which I think-
Can we get that information?
Well, we could certainly have a little,
And would they break it?
CRD-wide competition or something, couldn't we?
In a dark room.
Lit by natural light. But,
Thank you.
yeah,
That's all.
sorry.
That's all I have.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. You're never going to get me to argue Dwayne's point about planting more trees and creating a nice streetscape and canopy. I think that's brilliant. My question is regards to West Shore RCMP as a building owner or a part owner and purveyor in receipt of their service. I'm surprised they're not part of
That's a good
as
point.
well.
I'll ask Helen
I
about that.
think the answer to that is, for some reason, police forces don't get included, and I can't remember why.
Well, they can't not burn gas.
Or an energy force.
No, included in your corporate emission stats.
But they're building emissions and stuff. That's probably something that they would probably have greater control over. I wonder.
Yeah, I think it's.
Some.
If it's not included in us.
Oh, that's great. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Then I don't know that we want.
I was just
to-
curious.
Are we
That's-
part owners in that building? Or
Yes,
is that
we
a
are.
central building?
No, it's we're owners.
Yeah.
Langford, View Royal, and Colwood.
Oh.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. I'm all on board the trees as well, of course. We also need to report on how we're doing on wetlands, because they're the other big carbon sink out there. One thing I think it is worth thinking about is, I like what we did last year, where we sort of took our 14,000 and we said, hey, here's a project we're going to invest in that actually kind of benefits us in terms of it reduces our energy costs. And by the way, it also helps to reduce our greenhouse gas emission. I'd love to see us kind of identify what's the next project? What are we going to spend the $11,000 on that's going to get us our next big bang for the buck? And you talked about, Michael, sort of turning over some of the lights in the city and stuff like that. So, I'd love to, not necessarily nail it down tonight, but I'd love to kind of have that sense at budget time when we're talking about it, having that kind of, all right, this is what we're going to do with that 11,000, not just let it sit in a corner, but let's invest it in a way that saves us money. So the only other thought I had is, it's a great report. It's got fantastic information. Can we ask Sandra to turn it into at very least a some information on our website and perhaps even a little press release. So just, just brag a little. Why not? Okay, recommendation is, I think, fairly straightforward.
So moved.
Moved by Gordy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favour? Thank you. Michael, you're going to give us, I believe, a quick capital projects update.
I received an update from Emmett just now.
Which you're going to read off the
Just in.
teeny tiny phone.
Breaking news.
It says, damn, no, driving. In other words, he didn't send it.
Ah, okay. Maybe we can ask for that at our September. We'll get it straight from the Emmett's mouth.
Luthier's course in Seattle.
Okay.
A what now?
Luthier's guitar maker.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. So we will look forward to his fulsome report in September.
Yes.
Which is a way of saying our next meeting is not Tuesday, September the 2nd, because Planning and Land Use Committee is that night, but it is, in fact, Wednesday, September the 3rd. Same time, same place.
September the 3rd?
September the 3rd.
Don't we normally sit on Mondays?
Yes, but if you want to work on Labor Day, you go right ahead. I ain't going to be here.
No, that's fine, but that's why I assumed it would be the second Monday.
Not the 8th, you mean?
No, that's council. So that's typically what happens to us, is we get bumped to the... So Wednesday, September the 3rd.
At 6:30.
At 6:30. Okay. Anybody like to move adjournment, Gordy?
So moved.
Anybody not in favour? Okay, we're good on that one. All right.